Good afternoon, and welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I am W.D. Foster Graham. I'm the book review editor of Insight News, and I will be your host today for the Conversation of Al McFarlane's Book Chat Thursday. Uh, on the Conversation of Al McFarlane, we provide informative, stimulating, robust, and inspiring conversation. And so we are currently at 1,400 subscribers, and we're shooting for that 2,000. So if you are enjoying our content, please like, share, subscribe, spread the word to your network. First, I'd like to give a shout out to everyone who attended the Minnesota Black Authors Expo event last Saturday at the George Latimer Library in downtown St. Paul. It was a beautiful event. Our performing artist was none other than T. Michael Rambo, and in attendance was our St. Paul's Mayor Melvin Carter III. So, so stay posted here for further events. Now, in regards to our guest today, she has a Doctor of Education and is the founder of CEO of Sankore Consulting. She's a visionary educator and an innovative strategist dedicated to advancing social justice, inclusion, and digital transformation in education. Her expertise in innovation and strategic planning is evidenced by her diverse academic background and professional certifications. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in History, a Master's in Teaching from Drake University, and a Doctorate in Education in Critical Pedagogy from the University of St. Thomas, complemented by graduate certificates in learning technologies, e-learning, and online teaching. Her commitment to staying at the forefront of current innovation trends is further demonstrated by her 9 distinct certifications and micro-credentials, including Digital Business Strategy and Innovating with the Business Model Canvas, Innovation for Impact, the Carlson Polizzotto Method of Value Creation, Strategic Planning and Execution, Design Sprint and Certified Workshopper Masterclass Certification, and Systemic Innovation Training Specialist. Now, during her 21-year tenure with the Minneapolis Public School System, Dr. Block has held various roles that showcased her ability to implement innovative strategies and lead transformative initiatives. As a technology integration specialist and strategic project administrator for the superintendent's office, she spearheaded efforts to modernize educational practices and enhance student outcomes through digital innovation. And that's just the beginning. So it is my great pleasure to bring to you Dr. Lanise Block.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here and share this time with you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I say, hey, your credentials are stellar.
I didn't know you were going
Yeah.
to read all of that.
Like I said, that was just the beginning. Yeah. But before our viewers, tell us a little bit more about, how you grew up, where you grew up, that sort of thing.
Um,
What was your childhood like?
well, I love to say I'm a North Sider. I grew up in North Minneapolis, and I matriculated through the schools in North Minneapolis. I went to Willard, and then Lincoln, then Franklin, and North High School. And I graduated from North High School. I'm a proud Polar. So that's kind of where I had gained all of my experiences. Definitely feeling like the experiences through being part of the village. I was just actually talking to my brother, who just recently moved back here from the Carolinas, and we talked about how since I've been an adult and been in other spaces, that a lot of teachers, a lot of people didn't have experience in African American educator professional in the school system until they got to like college or something. And he and I talked, and we counted that through from elementary school until we to high school, we had like at least 26 different African American educators that were either actual teachers or like either a counselor or a social worker that we encountered in our educational experience in specifically North Minneapolis. And so I think that we both talked about, we think that informed who we were as people, and definitely gave us an example of Black excellence, and at this just at very beginning of our formative lives, and definitely helped us understand that who we were and what we were proud people, and where achievement was like a given, and it was explicit and implicitly taught to us, and the examples that we saw just regularly that we kind of took for granted. I thought everybody was having this experience, but apparently everybody was not, and so just a lot of really great experience. I feel like the village was part of what I experienced in my own family. Was part of that experience in North Minneapolis. My mother, my grandmother, and all my 7 aunts and uncles were definitely part of that experience growing up in North Minneapolis. We all kind of lived, within a 4 or 5 block radius of each other, and so that definitely also was part of the experience growing up. For me, growing up in North Minneapolis, people always talk about the rough and tough and tumble parts of it, but for me, it was a very nurturing experience, and there was lots of things that were vibrant and beautiful in that time. I know that for instance, my mother was a lab technician and a nurse, and she worked for Dr. Johnson's office. That was a African-American medical space, and there was an office there. And we went to the King's grocery store, which was African-American owned grocery store, which was a liquor store next door to that. And then there was a gas station on Plymouth and Penn also at one point. And so I remember all of those businesses that existed when I was a child, that we frequent. Again, we take those things for granted. And oftentimes people think, I feel that those things never existed in the community because they don't exist now, but they did exist. And even before that, there were even more African-American businesses, particularly in North Minneapolis. So I just have a lot of pride in that community. Definitely, my heart is still there. They say NFL, Northsider for life, and that's certainly how I feel.
Hey, thank you for sharing that, Lanise, because those are things I grew up with as a Southsider. And yes, I'm a proud Central pioneer, but they say that the very qualities that you described were also happening in the Southside community and stuff. Of course, when you think about it, I know when I grew up, all those sections were redlined: Rondo, North Minneapolis, and South Minneapolis. But the thing that happened was, what happened was the nurturing of the community and the flavor of the community. Most definitely. So, yes, hat tip.
Yes.
So my question to you is, okay, who would you consider were your mentors?
Oh, I feel like I had a lot of them. First was my mother. Went on to Sankore. She was she always said she was a single mother, but she didn't raise us singly. My brother, myself, my brothers. Definitely, she was an example. Worked many jobs, and she got her education alongside of us. She started out. She had done some college before she had us, and then she got her bachelor's degree with us, and then her master's degree with us as well. And so what I saw from that is that every time she got a new credential, our lives improved a little bit more. And that to me was an example. She would sometimes my grandmothers, my aunts and uncles would take care of us many times when she had to go to school. But sometimes, they couldn't get the help. And so she took us to college with her when my brothers and I remember going to college classes with her over at the University of Minnesota, walking through campus with her. So these were, early on, I've understood the importance of education from my own mother, who would do anything and make sure that we were properly educated. And that was the first very, very prime example of like who was a person example and a mentor in my life. And the next one, just definitely my grandmother, Thelma Battle Buckner, who was definitely a pillar in the community. And I spent a lot of time with her and just got to understand the extreme work ethic and how you have to put a lot of effort into things. And it was all about action. I remember one time I was a young person, and he was in a basement, and I went down to the basement. There was all these grocery bags filled like that, all these rows. And it was like me and my cousins, we had a job. We were supposed to put like all these different things into the bags. I was like, Granny, what are we doing? She was like, I've been going to these meetings in the community. Somewhere she said she go to these meetings. We were talking about feeding the hungry, and she was like, we keep going to these meetings. meetings. I've been going to these meetings for like 2 months, and I'm tired of talking about it. So I decided to actually feed the hungry. So she had gone and gotten all this food. I don't know where she got it from. And so our jobs is like my cousins and I, where's the fill? I'll fill all these bags with like all these like boxes and cans and stuff like that. And then my uncles, their job was to take the bags and then go to distribute them like over like in the projects and stuff like that when they're down over there by the highway. And so those were those examples that I had very early on about action and what it means to be a part of the community and what it means to be giving and not just talking about it, but to be about it. And so those are just a couple of the examples just right away in my own family. And then other examples too that people, organizations that I was a part of. I can't even name all the different examples I had of African American women that were leading the organizations that I was part of as a young person. And then also even the men part of the community that I saw that were pillars happening in there. I think I have to name Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati, who was part of the Asili Institute when I was a young teenager. That would happen on Saturday mornings, and we would go there over at Oak Park, and him and others that were there would be leading and talking about our history. That's where I learned most of my history, and all the like African American history was at his tutelage, and one of the things that he talked about. Even when he would say something, it would make me curious, and I would go and learn more. But definitely being in those spaces that we created for ourselves, the outside of the school system, and having to go those places. It was a multi-generational space. So it was teenagers were there like myself, and then also older people, elders, and those kinds of things. It was definitely a space that we definitely learned, and I grew and I thrived, and definitely catapulted me on the future. I eventually became a history teacher, and all of the lessons, all the things that I had gained from that experience, I imparted to my own students and more, tenfold. And so that's those are experiences that fed me, and I tried to give it back.
Yeah, that's true. Because at the end of the day, it has to be walk the walk as well as talk the talk.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. Then, now you and Dr. Naomi Ray Taylor, which I had the pleasure of interviewing on a previous show, will co-author Cultivating Courage.
Yes.
Okay, and you create a framework that connects ancient wisdom symbols to modern equity leadership.
Yes.
So the question is, what inspires you to bridge these worlds, and how does this approach transform how leaders tackle systemic change?
Excellent. So I'm so glad we have a lot of time because I got a lot to say about that.
Oh, yes, you're here. Yep, yeah.
So to back up a little bit, so Naomi and I, we met each other when we were working for the public school system, and we were working kind of in two different areas, but we often were doing, because our role was in leadership, and we did trainings and around various topics, and often the heart of it was around leadership, and it was around cultural responsiveness and equity, diversity, all those kinds of things. And so we did that work while we were still working in the system. And then also when we left the system, and we wrote, I was doing consulting work by that time, and then Naomi was doing some other leadership works in other places, but doing the same thing. And we were doing this work outside of the public school system and in other spaces. And so what we discovered, having both of those experiences over a long period of time, was that people were having a similar kind of deficit. Let's say that. That there needed to be something to connect. Because there's oftentimes these trends that are happening. They're happening, kind of up here. People were talking about, oh, there's a checklist, do this, do that, make sure you saying this, make sure you don't say that. And there's some like a checklist of practices that that it keeps you from getting sued, that kind of thing, right? And all the companies and organizations want to make sure that their people are doing those things. But what we felt like was really for people what we felt like were we met people who really wanted to change and make transformation in their organization. They really wanted to change the needle, and we understood that the change that needed to happen required a rooting process, required something that was stronger and more connected, and needed something that was helping people make the transformation. And we understood that needed to be connected to something that was stronger, that had roots itself. And so that's why we decided to connect it to the ancient symbols of the Adinkra symbols that came from the Kan people of West Africa, Ghana. And so we wanted to connect it to those things so that people would understand that these things that you're going through are not new. These things that you're going through, ideas you're having are not new, but and so that all the things that we can understand about leadership and trouble and strife and overcoming and winning, all of those things that are happening, we have the model, we have the way, but it requires something of you. And those as much as you're getting something, it also requires that you give. And so this is kind of our philosophy around why we are taking something from the past and connecting it with the present to move everybody toward the future. And that's kind of the general idea of what of our framework and how we are connecting those things together.
And it makes a difference.
Yes.
So now, something that I read is important. It says that diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there's another component to that: belonging.
Yes.
So can you elaborate on that?
So belonging is about how are you making sure that the person it's because one part of those other things happen to talk about is like it doesn't address kind of, it's more of a tactical experience, and it doesn't address the feeling that goes along with how of what those experiences like. We always talk about one is being at the party, one is being invited to the party, one is being invited to the dance or whatever, but it doesn't really talk about how are you experiencing that, how are you experiencing all of the things, right? And just being at the party, right? And so the belonging really talks about how are people feeling as do they feel like this is a place, a welcoming place? All of those things are part of what belonging is, and that's sort of a new I wouldn't say new term, but like relatively new term that's been added to that sort of mixture.
And yeah, that's important to the overall looking as leadership runs. I was also, excuse me, I was also checking out the fact that yes, everything builds upon the previous step, and so there were three areas that I focused on. That was one, it's the 5 pillars of critical equity leadership identity, then the 5 stages of identity development, and the 5 change agent dispositions. So can you take us through that process?
So the process, so there's a transformational kind of general framework that talks about head, heart, and hands. And so we kind of wanted to, that's a popular framework that already exists. And so we wanted to connect that framework to kind of what we were doing already, or not. Those kind of things we wanted to connect. So the head part is kind of like the knowledge, about understanding what you're doing, and what that means. And so for us, the pillars are the 5 pillars are the ideas about what, like the critical cultural consciousness, like what is like just getting the ideas about how are we functioning in this world, and then critical understanding of past inequities. We felt like that was critical. People are thinking that things are just coming out of the blue. And we don't understand there's history around this. Like why are other people, living in a certain area because it was designed to do that, right? And then critical analysis of present inequities. How does that impact us now? And then critical cultural competency, like what is it? How this is when you start to put things into action and to be an advocate and start to make things happen. And then the ultimate one is our paragon pillar, as we describe it, is courageous equity-based decision. This is where we always said where the rubber meets the road, where the impact is happening. We have seen so many times that leaders who want to make the difference, they get right to this point where it's really going to make a difference. And then this is where the resistance happens also. And they can't pull a trigger. They can't make that decision. They can't, because it requires courage. To resist the people that will come and to actually allocate the resources in a different way, to actually to change the policy and stick to it. That requires a great deal of courage, because people are going to absolutely resist that. And so that's why all of these represent knowledge. And the next things are the hands, the ideas, that the skill of it, and those are the 5 steps of the continuum. And that really focuses on how you move through the knowledge. How do you manage the knowledge? And that focuses on the idea of critical considerations. How are you thinking about this? Compelling practices. What are the things that you are going to be doing to move through this? And we have for that we have a companion website that has a plethora of resources that people can go through, and we update it, constantly. I'm constantly doing things and moving things around on there. The critical reflection that makes that, you have to pause and understand what's happening as part of the process, and then the commitment, the compelling commitment. What is your skin in the game? What is it? What are you deciding? What decisions are you making that you're gonna actually do? Commitment, kind of like, marriage vows. What are you saying that you're gonna do, kind of no matter what, right? And then what is the critical action that you're willing to commit to? What is the critical action that you're willing to do? Because you can't just sit around talking about things. You can't just admire the problem forever. You have to actually have to do something. And then also the heart, which is your why. These are the dispositions. The dispositions really include it's like a process. The believing, centering, growing, grounding, and leading. And these are the steps that you kind of have to go through to really kind of undergird the process. We really want it to be attending to the emotional capacity, the emotional work. Kind of, I would even say sometimes the emotional warfare that is involved with being a leader in developing your identity. It's not easy, and we wanted to acknowledge that and understand it's an emotional process. These are the emotional steps that go through that's involved in the heart. So that's kind of the journey, the way that we're framing the work.
Well, I see how all the components work together. I guess sometimes I think the hardest one is saying you have to look inside yourself.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Now, because I guess you have to kind of face, where you're at, what are your strengths? What are your emotions? What are your fears related to what's going on? And to that step with Cultivating Courage.
Right. And that's why we wanted to make it a workbook. That's something Dr. Taylor and I really focused on, because in this is not just, something that we're creating something that people can move, act on, and something exists outside of you. It's within this, it's a tool, and it's writing, and we have exercises and things and reflection for you to actually use. It's supposed to be interactive, and that is intentional. It's not a whole lot of we're not trying to be verbose in this text, and there's a whole lot of theory and stuff like that. We put like a link or a book, and you can go look at that yourself. It's really supposed to be an approachable, accessible point where the people who are ready to get to work. If you want to, learn about a whole bunch of theory, then this is not the book for you. This is, there's other things you can do, and the books you can read, and TED Talks you can watch. But if you are ready to get to work, then and go through the steps. We are saying that you do need to go through the prescribed steps. You can't go from one up to 5. That's not what we're saying. You do need to go through our steps. But you definitely, this is about action, and it's about application. It's about the practitioners who want to move through this process with a guided process that it will help you do the transformational work, and with some knowledge, with some constructive processes that help you along the way.
Indeed. And I guess I sense that it also has a holistic element into it.
Yes, that's what we were trying to do.
Right. Now,
because we often see so many times that sorry to cut you off, Mr. Foster Graham. What we often also saw in our work, that people sometimes we're like, we don't know how. We want to do it, but we don't know how, and we don't have the know-how or the. And so this is what we also wanted to provide, everything you need, even because we often were like, we can't be everywhere, Naomi and I, Dr. Taylor and I. And so we wanted to provide all of the resources for even when in places where we were absent. So we wanted to pour everything into this. So all of the questions, the resources, and the activities, all those things that so it's designed for people who want to do this just alone themselves, and kind of go through the process. But we also wanted it to be something that people who were leading work with us, with a staff or with a team, they can go through it together, and it can be a tool for that as well. So that's why we wanted to, because we wanted to, like you said, wanted to make it holistic and make it as something that people can use to build themselves and also their teammates as well.
Indeed, indeed. Now we hear a lot, or it's been talked about a lot about the disparities. So in Minnesota, in terms of education, employment, home ownership, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of addressing those disparities, where would that show up in this process? So far as the book and so far as the approach.
So in our so I don't know if I mentioned this already. I was a teacher also. Once I graduated from North High School, I went to college, and I came back to the system, and I taught in the classroom for 15 years. And I taught both at North and Henry and Franklin, all those high schools, all those places like right in North Minneapolis. And so saying that to say, also, I'm going to add this part too. Minnesota has one of the we have two things are true. We have one of the greatest disparities in our country, but we also have one of the most educated teaching forces. We have one of the most teachers, one of the most states that have the most teachers with master's degrees in the nation. So how do those two things exist? Right? It's a conundrum, right?
Yes.
And so our white students are doing, smashingly well. They're getting a resounding education. It's our Black, Brown, and Indigenous students who are not. Why is that? Right? And so there's lots of stories, research and things about it, but there's many factors that contribute to that. And there's lots of people. You ask different people different on different days, and they might say different things. But since I'm here and you're asking me, I'm going to tell you what I think. And a lot of it is to do with skill level in some ways. It has to do with resources in some ways, and some of it has to do with just people who don't want to do better, and then they just don't know how in some cases. And so this book helps to just the people who want to do better, who want to understand how to be a better leader, a better educator, and needed to understand the why. Sometimes they don't understand, why do we are everybody, like for instance in the North Minneapolis, why what does that mean that this is a community that doesn't have what is I thinking of, the property tax that would make the school system better funded, and thereby have more opportunities in the schools that go there. Why is that? Because that was designed because by redlining to isolate those communities and keep that happening by the covenants and all those things that are happening. And so sometimes if people have that information, it takes some of the things that the prejudices, the biases that they have in their mind that are living within them, it releases them from it. And so they're like, oh, we can have a better conversation now that I understand those particular things. And so then many of them are operating. Sometimes people are operating with biases that they may not know they have. And when they get new information, it releases them from it and allows them to be a better leader. It allows them to be a better educator. And so this is why we feel like some of the pillars. Each of those pillars were so critical because we met many times people who were ill-informed or misinformed or not informed at all. This is part of the process of liberating people from that to allow them to understand what they're experiencing it without the context. And sometimes people come and they're giving whatever workshop whatever, but they're missing the context of why. I know there's a popular a guy who goes around giving culturally responsive teaching workshops, and he's always talking about always teaching the teachers about in suburban areas about call and response. And so my issue, and that's okay, that's fine, but my issue with that is that it doesn't talk about why. Where did that come from and why? It doesn't talk about the anti-literacy legislation that was a part of our experience in the United States. That the United States is the only country that has ever had anti-literacy legislation where people were forbidden to teach people how to read. That only applied to us as previously enslaved people. And so so we had to figure out, and we always were innovative people, how to transfer information in spite of this idea that we were forbidden to learn how to read. And so we developed this kind of call and response sort of thing. And so you can't teach that call and response as a teaching strategy without also giving this history as part of it. And to do that is a disservice. And so this is part of why this idea of understanding past inequities is fundamental to our work with this text.
Indeed. You could say, if you don't know the history behind it, then what?
You're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Now, your book, it introduces the concept of courageous equity-based decision making and as the paragon pillar, which you just mentioned previously. So can you share an example of how this looks in practice? And something else we touched on too, particularly when leaders face significant resistance.
Yes. So this can look a lot of ways in practice, and often it's at the end. Sometimes it's at the beginning, but often it's at the end. You're like, oh, let's do this thing. And people are like, yeah, we can do that. We can create a task force about whatever. And people will go along with it, and we're like, well, let's get the people together. Let's create a proper presentation. Let's even have like a luncheon about it. Let's create the community. Let's do a study. Let's submit the report. Let's do all of those things, right? But when it comes to the part where you have to make the courageous decision, and when it comes time to actually, often it's about money. Actually allocate the funds in a way that is different than was allocated before. That's where you have to make that's where the courageous equity-based decision has to happen, because that's where people will make the most problems, and they will you'll have the biggest fight on your hand, is when people who thought they had previously thought that they were entitled to something that belonged to them, and they don't want to see it go away. They're going to put up the biggest resistance to that. Even if it didn't really belong to them in the first place, it's still they still are going to feel like they're losing something. And so even if they, in theory, think it's a good idea to have this, initiative to include more people, it's a good idea to have this initiative that they're going to, we're going to service this other population. That's a really great idea. They feel like that until it means that the fund that it's coming from is going to be diverted somewhere else. And then all of a sudden, it's real, and all of a sudden, maybe it's not such a good idea, or maybe we should adjust it. Maybe instead of having 100, maybe we should just do 5, something like that. And so that's often how it looks, or like it related to like policy. It's a good idea to have a policy about know something until I want to do that. And then all of a sudden it's a problem, or it's a good idea we're going to have this policy to include this or that until that makes me uncomfortable, or I don't agree with that, or that's not what I thought it was going to look like. I didn't know it was going to impact me personally, kind of like what we're experiencing now. I didn't know that the ICE is going to come get me. It makes that's when the not that was a courageous decision, but that's those kinds of things when people are understanding that the whether it's happening is having an impact on them, there's always going to be a reaction. So then how as a leader, how do you handle it? First, the best thing to do is to anticipate it. Understand that this is not going to be, a bed of roses, and everybody's not going to give you warm fuzzies when you are doing something that really makes change. That you have to anticipate it and be ready for it. So there's some things you can do kind of preemptively, kind of just be as transparent as possible, and kind of get as many people champions on board as you can, kind of preemptively. And that's some preemptive strategies ahead of time. But then also in the midst of it, understand that everybody's not going to end up at the end with you. There are going to be some people that are not gonna go through it with you. My grandmother used to say, every garden needs weeding. And so understand that is part of the process as well, and be okay with it. Minnesota Nice often encourages us to think that we have to make everybody comfortable. Not everybody, but our friends comfortable. And that's the goal. But sometimes, some people have to, or maybe not always going to be on the train at the end, and be comfortable with that. And that's okay. That's not your intention, but that is something that you have to come to terms with at times. And understanding that at the beginning is helpful.
Indeed. With I was just thinking of a quote and because as you're sharing, different things kind of come to mind and stuff, and say this is all valuable information, most definitely. And because excuse me, John H. Johnson, the late John H. Johnson, who was Johnson Publishing Company, had a motto with his business: find a need, meet the need, and do it well. And now for you, and I'm going to it will be my next question, but answer this question: how has that translated into your work?
Into my work or into this book?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I'll talk both of these things. So for this, like I mentioned before, for this book, it really was about meeting the need. We were talking, but Dr. Taylor and I, and Dr. Lanise, we were talking after a debrief, one of our sessions, and she wrote it down or something. We were talking, and she was like, "What these people, they really want to do better. What they need is an equity identity." And I was like, "Oh, that's exactly what they need." And so this was like, years ago. I've been working on this book since before COVID. And so that's we were. So it came from this ideas came from a need that we saw. And so we were like, yes, let's think about that. What does that mean? What would an identity look like for that we were, if we would, okay, what would the components be, and what would be something that we feel like is critical to that? And so these are how those components, those things I told you about manifest. And then after that, we were thinking, but we need something more. And so those were the kind of where we got the idea of the innovative strategies. That's kind of like the second part. How do we do this? How do we do not keep doing it the same old way? You get the same thing, get the same results. And so we wanted to try to also have people to think about things in a different way, so that they can get different results. So we added some innovative strategies, some innovative examples, case studies within the text, so that we can help people, give people permission to think about things and doing things differently. So that, and that's another like risk as well. This is a whole risky thing, which is why we call it cultivating courage, because you absolutely need courage to do this work. It's not for the light of heart. But that's another reason also why sometimes it's good to have like team people to do this with. But again, we wanted to think about innovation in a way that in both micro and macro wave. We have some models in there that you can have do just, sometimes it's just something small in an innovation, like try something, prototype something that's a very small idea or small initiative, and see how it works. And that controlled small environment first, micro environment, and then enlarge it and increase and amplify and move forward in that way. And that sometimes helps people, gives them the courage, and you can always point to that example. But definitely try different things. Move forward in sometimes small ways will help people move the needle, and instead of just doing nothing and just, as we are wont to do, admire the problem, as I mentioned before. And so that's why we wanted to put those other sort of tools, those sort of other sort of examples in there to get people, again, moving toward action, for the practitioners who want to move, who want to do, who want to make sure that this becomes part of who they are, and not just, theoretical ideology that sits on a shelf.
Yeah. In other words, you're here, hit the ground, and actually be doing the work versus having something out there in the ether somewhat.
Exactly. And in my own work with Sankore, my business, I focus on helping organizations primarily nonprofits and small businesses with this work, focusing on their strategic goals and helping them meet their strategic goals, with digital tools being one of the ways, but mostly doing like other things, innovative processes, like things like design sprints, the design thinking, logic modeling, all those kinds of things is kind of what my work is done, because again, some of the things that I've seen when I'm working with organizations, I see that they could optimize their processes, that to make things go smoother, to get more out of the work they're doing, and also help them continue to be aligned to their mission. And that's because that's definitely something that means a lot to me, is the work the mission kind of focused, driven work. And so that's kind of what I do for my company.
And we came into my next question was about Sankore, about the company in terms of what it does. So, what was the seed, the genesis of Sankore?
So it's Sankore, and it's Sankore was a college in the University of Timbuktu, in ancient Mali. The university was a university, and then Sankore was one of the colleges where you didn't have to be admitted to the university. You can just go there, and it was kind of like a place for like rigorous, intrinsic sort of thought. And so when I heard about that, I learned about that. I was like, I wanted to create a consultancy with that same idea. I don't feel like I'm an expert necessarily. Even when I was as a teacher in the classroom, I always felt like I was a teacher and a student. My students were teachers and students. I'm a constructivist educator, and what that means is that it's a symbiotic relationship that I don't stand in front of a class and like lecturing. Like I feel like I'm talking a lot in this thing, but I guess it's a long hour. And so this is not like, I don't have like a didactic teaching style. And so even when I'm doing workshops and trainings, I don't stand up in front and do a lot of that. So basically it means that the working that we do is a collaborative process. And so I post scenarios, and then we work through them together. We pull it out, because I always believe that people have the answer inside, and just need some things to help pull it out. And then we work together. And one of my favorite phrases is, all of us are smarter than one of us. And so the foundational concept of my consultancy. And so that's kind of where I wanted to begin, because I felt like people that I interacted with, that were around the community, like I talked about, growing up in that space, I felt like they were geniuses, but it wasn't always honored or recognized, even for themselves. And I wanted to create or have or make space for that sort of genius, where those models, like design thinking, those kinds of things really spoke to me. And I wanted to figure out a way to amplify that and create an agency that amplified that sort of thinking and that sort of process, where those people that weren't maybe not traditionally book smart, right, could figure out where their place was, where they entered into a planning process, and where they can enter in a strategic outlook sort of thing. And so that's kind of where I started. Because even when I was in the classroom, there was this idea of James, not James, Gardner, I forgot his first name, 7 intelligences. I think there's up to like 9 now, but when I was getting my teacher's license, almost 30 years ago, it was 7. And so there's 7 different kinds of intelligences. And so like one is like music, one is kinesthetic, one is like word smart, all these different kinds of things. But when I was planning my lessons, like I should say, plan my units, like let's say there's 10 units in a lesson, 10 lessons in a unit. I said that backwards. 10 lessons in a unit. And so I would always try to make sure that those 7 intelligences were represented in every unit that I did, so that the kids would have, so a kid would have at least one opportunity to have whatever intelligence they had evident, and at least at some point within this unit whenever I did. So that was something that was always really important to me. And so sometimes the kids would complain. Like, you're not this kind of teacher. Like I would be like, they would always say, you're not the English teacher, or you're not the music teacher. And I would be like, I am the teacher though. Anyways, so this is, so that kind of thing always was with me. So I carried that into my work now, and wanting to create space for that kind of non-traditional sort of ideas, non-traditional intelligence, non-traditional input, participatory work is sort of the things that are important to me, and how I interact with the people that contract with me.
Yeah, that works for me most definitely, because one of the things that some of my guests have said, one, that leaders are readers, and two, to succeed, you must read. Now, for me, my dad read constantly, and he passed that down to me. And so, um, tell me about, yes, you shared about a book that you read called We Want to Do More Than Survive. Dr. Bettina Love wrote it. So tell me your impressions of that book.
So that book is transformation. I feel like there's probably 5 or 6 notable um, educational reformists. I'll just call them that I read, and I feel like they've definitely made an impact on my life. And so, but Dr. Tina Love is just the newest one, but definitely Dora Ladson Billings, Dr. Geneva Gay, Dr. Pedro Noguera, um, um, Dr. Lisa Delpit. Those were definitely some heavy hitters, right? I definitely recommend everybody read those. But this one, Dr. Nina Love is new to the game, and she's relatively young. I think she's been here a couple times to Minnesota, and so this book, We Want to Do More Than Survive, talks about what the educational industrial complex, and it characterizes education, the system of education, as a kind of like an industrial place, and what it's doing, what it has done, and what it's doing, particularly post Reagan, and the things that, and particularly focuses in on urban areas, and how it contextualizes, how it focuses on the things the harms that are happening to children. That's particularly what I thought was particularly fascinating, around what initiatives that are supposedly that are characterized with helping, but they're actually doing a lot of harm, and being
Mm,
interrogating those ideas, around some very key things that we think about. They're being touted as these great, savior ideas, but they're actually not. They're doing us a lot of harm. And so that she talks about some of those things, and also talks about some of the ideologies that teachers need to get around in order to be successful, particularly with African American and Latinx children, and Indigenous children. And so those are some key aspects that really stand out to me. So she just does a lot of what I really enjoyed about the book, is she gives a lot of interrogating of our systems, some of our ideologies, and definitely some of our pedagogical behaviors that we take for granted as just standard practices in a classroom. And I just really because there are her thesis that it's not only about surviving. That's kind of where we are landing at the bottom, kind of like our whole idea of like Black Lives Matter. That's like a basic thing. Like why are people going crazy about something so basic as just mattering, right? And so the idea that we want to do more than just only survive. We want it to thrive, and we can and we should. And these are some things that can happen, that should happen, to make that possible.
yeah, it's more than about this survival mentality. It's
Exactly.
about how we thrive on every level, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So, oh yes. Now this has come to my mind here, um, since I think you touched on different points on my next question, that you approach your equity work through an innovation lens rather than just compliance. Oh, compliance sounds like such a dirty word. Excuse
It
me.
is.
How does framing equity leadership as an innovative practice change outcomes compared to traditional diversity approaches?
Yeah, because I mentioned this before. We have to do it. We have to do it differently. We are, so much of the world is changing Now, and people and everybody always says that, right? That everything is changing so much, and so, but I feel like it really it really is. Think about it, even like the technology that is happening, and what are the possibilities that are being born now, and what you can do versus what we could do before, and that's gonna I would say that's gonna continue to happen. It's only gonna keep replicating itself, and so we have to do both things. We have to keep in our memory and keep in our spirit what things we already have done, and learn from those things. What are the lessons? We have to keep those in our spirit, in our mind. But we also have to think about what are the new opportunities that our current system offers us. What are the things that we can do differently from the lessons that we learn? How can we extrapolate and go further faster? How can we make a greater impact with doing something? How can we work smarter and not harder? And that's kind of a lot of what innovation kind of allows us to do. And if we are not taking advantage of those sort of innovative ideas, and those the tools that are available to us, then we're just sitting in a room, in the dark, watching black and white movies for no good reason. And so we need to think about, and the world is passing us by. They're leaps and bounds ahead of us, and we're just, with our ostriches with our head in the sand. And so we have to get our head out of the sand and look around and see what are the opportunities. And so I know that sometimes it's hard to think about the new tools that you got to learn and the new ways of thinking. But I would encourage all of us to do that. I know the boomers, you guys got to come along, got to come along with us. I'm a Gen X. And so I know it's a challenge. I'm kind of in the middle, like it's a challenge, but you gotta at least be open to it. You don't have to learn all the stuff, you learn everything, but you have to be willing to learn some things, and at least be leaning into the conversation, right? We want to hear all the stories, but we want to know and hear all the lessons. But we also have that's one part of the conversation. The other part of the conversation is how do we take those lessons and apply it to the new paradigms, the new tools, the new strategies, the new frameworks. How do we do that? And that's where the innovation lies. Both of those things are necessary. And so we need everybody. We need the boomers and the Gen Xers, the Ys, the Gs, whatever else, we need everybody. We need everybody at the table now. We can't leave anybody out.
No, we can't. Which brings my question, because with the efforts to erase our history, and also to basically try undercut education, what are the things we can come together with to thrive and strive in spite of what's going on, the opportunities?
I would say I was a history teacher for 15 years in the system, and I would say it is our responsibility to teach our own history. It's unlikely that they're going to do it, and it's unlikely that they would do it for fidelity. It's unlikely they would do it consistently. And I would say in some cases you don't want them doing it. So we have to do what we've done before. I mentioned at the onset about it's a Sealing Institute that used to exist on Saturday mornings at the Oak Park Community Center. People like Dr. Mahmoud El-Kati and others were there leading that. We have to recreate those things again. And so obviously the lesson is maybe we can't have that physical space again, but definitely some spaces that are virtual. Right, like we're here now. I'm not at a studio with you. We're doing this virtual, and so we need to create those things. As parents, I told the people at my church when it was my turn to do the Black History Month presentation that it's up to you in your home to teach your kids about Black history. Do not count on the school system to do that. You can absolutely go and hold them accountable that this is what should be happening, but do not count on it. You have to do that in your own home, in our own community spaces, in your own church. You need to be doing that in your own. If you don't go to church, your mosque or wherever it is that you gather, in our own community centers that we are in charge of. We need to be doing our own history, culture stuff in our own space, because they are not going to do it. And even if they do, we don't know. We don't want to turn it over to them. It is our history, and we should be holding it and to ourselves and being in charge of what gets said, when, and how. And that is our responsibility. And we can figure out, again, the innovative ways to make that happen. I know you guys are thinking of, I know you probably have heard of that new initiative on TikTok. It's called Hillman Talk. University with the woman who started like a virtual HBCU on TikTok, where African American people are sharing are giving like lessons, like teaching classes about African American topics, and it's free, and people are just doing and volunteering to do that. I heard about it later. I wanted to sign up to teach a class, but the registration was down by the time I got there for the next session. But things like that. So again, that's taking the lessons of this is what we need to do from the past, but then creating the new opportunity, and that's what I'm talking about, like making the innovation, merging those two things. And so those are the things we have to do. And so we can't go. I mean, that's from somebody else. You might ask somebody else, they might say something different, but that's what I'm saying. And it's our responsibility to teach our kids, our young people in our homes, in our communities, in our spaces, our history, our culture, to do it so that we can make sure that it's done well.
Spot on, because what's the word? If we don't share our stories, someone else will, and it won't be accurate.
That's right.
So now I'm going to ask a question. I ask all of my authors this question. What advice would you give to your 13-year-old self from where you are now?
Oh, my 13-year-old self?
Yes.
Oh, my 13-year-old self. Oh, my 13-year-old self was a lot of angst, and I was tall for my age, and I didn't like it. I got teased a lot. And I didn't like it. I don't mind being tall now, but I didn't when I was 13. It was awkward. I would say to her that it's gonna get better. You're gonna grow into who you are, and eventually you and other people around you will appreciate the essence of who you are, and you're gonna really love yourself in the future.
Indeed. And yes. Yeah, I think about that time when I was 13. I was a nerd. I was definitely a nerd, but I embraced my nerdiness.
You're ahead of your time.
Yes. So now for our viewers, where can our viewers purchase Cultivating Courage?
You can purchase it on Barnes and Noble, or it's also available at the Black Garnet bookstore. Either one of those, I would suggest. You could also purchase it like at Amazon, but I'm boycotting Amazon, so you can go there if you want to. But definitely Barnes and Noble and the Black Garnet bookstore.
Right. Now, I guess we're coming to a close. This has been the most informative, it's most inspiring conversation, and so I encourage all of you out there, let's talk the talk and walk the walk. And Cultivating Courage is a workbook to work towards that. So you have any closing thoughts, Lanise?
Nope, just please support, get the book, and we would love to hear. If you like it, please definitely put it out, share with other people. If you don't like it, please email me and tell me what ways that we can improve, because Naomi and we had to just stop writing the book because we kept putting stuff in there. We would like to make another edition at some point, so if you got comments for improvements, please share them with us.
Great. You heard it here in conversation with Al McFarlane. Again, I want to thank our guest, Dr. Lanise Block, and also a shout out to Dr. Naomi Taylor for this amazing book, Cultivating Courage. And so I say thank you for being part of our show today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay. This is W.D. Foster Graham on the Conversation with Al McFarlane. And they say, see you on the next go round.